Hello there, and welcome to a little series I'm going to be doing on some lesser known games that came with the Humble Bundle Monthly. If you've been subscribed to the Humble Bundle Monthly for a few months now, you've probably got a huge backlog of Steam keys just sitting there for some really random games. So I thought I would take a look at a few of these and just give my opinions and a bit of a rating on whether I think they're either worth the download or if you don't have the Humble Bundle Monthly, maybe they're worth the purchase. So the game we're be talking about this episode is called Lost Castle. It was published by Hunter Studios. It was originally released in August 2016. However, it was included in the March 2018 Humble Bundle. If you were to buy this game now, it's $10 on the Steam store. And gameplay-wise, it's a roguelike dungeon crawler game. So I'd like to begin by looking at the movement mechanics of Lost Castle and comparing it to those other two games I had previously mentioned. So Lost Castle is almost like a combination of these other two games in the movement style. It kind of shares the same general room layout as The Binding of Isaac, where you have this almost complex of three-dimensionally square rooms that are all joined to each other horizontally. However, it has the same kind of fighting mechanics as Dead Cells or really any other side-scrolling game where you can only attack to the left and the right. So it's kind of a mixture of the two. However, I'd say in general it kind of almost takes the negatives of both, and it kind of makes it a little bit more clunky than either of them by themselves. To further compound this clunkiness is the fact that you cannot attack while moving. You have to stop and start attacking. It kind of leads to a kind of slowness in the gameplay compared to something like The Binding of Isaac. And it also leads to this button mashing where you end up smashing the one button and you get stuck in these kind of combos. A lot of the time when you want to dodge or move away, your character's still in the middle of attacking and he doesn't stop, he just kind of keeps going. In general, it kind of makes it a lot harder to dodge. I think it really affects the game's, how it flows and how it feels compared to some of these other titles I've been talking about. Probably the top selling feature of roguelike games is their replayability and their feeling of every run being slightly different and it kind of not getting stale by being the same thing over and over again. And while I think The Binding of Isaac and to a lesser extent Dead Cells does a really good job at this, Lost Castle falls a little bit short compared to these two other games. While there is a pretty impressive number of different weapons, they all kind of fall into different categories which share pretty much the exact same movement set. So you've got all the two-handed swords falling into one category, all the bows, all the staves, and etc. So while they all have different names and maybe some of them do fire damage versus frost damage, the movement sets and generally the playstyle is pretty much exactly the same between these different items and these subclasses. To continue this replayability theme, let's talk about the level design. So all three of the games we've been talking about are considered to have randomly generated levels. However, I would say that Lost Castle has by far the least random generation of any of the three. I found that the paths are pretty much linear in this game. There's very, very few side rooms, and in some of the different levels, like the forest level, there's pretty much no side rooms. It's just a straight path left to right all the way to the boss. So as far as being randomly generated, while some of the rooms look a bit different, the feel overall is pretty much the same. And this also continues in the types of different enemies you get per level or per floor. So I would say it's actually pretty similar to Dead Cells, where there's about 5 different types of enemies you can encounter on a floor, but much worse than The Binding of Isaac, which has honestly dozens. So in general, it kind of makes for a pretty similar experience each run through. When you combine that with the fact that a lot of the weapon movement skills are very similar, and the floors are very similar. All in all, I'd say this game has a lot less replayability than the other two games I have mentioned. So the final area I want to talk about in this game is something that kind of relates to a lot of these roguelike games, and something that I think that each game does slightly differently. And I'm not going to say that one style is better than the other, I just think they're different. And we're talking about the progression of these games through death. So with roguelike games, every time you die, you have to start a new character. You don't just like respawn with all your stuff. You have to start over again. However, there is some progression in most of these games, and specifically the 3 games that I'm talking about. So in Lost Castle, the progression system is as you kill enemies, you collect their souls. And when you die, you can use those souls to unlock different upgrades. Similarly to The Binding of Isaac, as you kill bosses, you unlock different items and you unlock different challenges, and sometimes you can go further into the game. In Dead Cells, you use the enemy cells much in a similar way to unlock different items and some different abilities. Now, I would say comparing these 3, Lost Castle has by far the most boring kind of progression. You do unlock new weapons by killing bosses in Lost Castle as well. However, the death upgrades that you get are they're really kind of boring. They're usually stat upgrades. They're like 1+1 attack, +1 defense. Your potions are better. Like, they're really kind of not overly exciting upgrades compared to some of the other 2 games I've been talking about. Now, if we want to talk about how well-tuned these kind of progressions are, I would say that in Lost Castle, while the improvements are pretty important, it's not gated like The Binding of Isaac. Like on your first run in Lost Castle, you can go all the way to the last boss. You don't have to unlock anything. However, it's pretty unlikely as you don't have any of the kind of stat upgrades that are pretty important, but it is doable. And I would say, honestly, that Dead Cells is probably the worst at this, with having to unlock more health potions. I find that the grind to get your more health potions or flask charges or whatever you want to call it it's really brutal. One thing I will say about Lost Castle is the progression rate of unlocking these things. It kind of has a very steep curve. So I think I played this game for about maybe 5 hours in total. And the first 2 hours, I was able to unlock lots of new stuff. I was able to use my souls. However, you start getting to the point where you need to unlock the next ability. You need, like, say, 200 different souls of the enemies. And some of the times, even if you get 75% of the way through this game, you wouldn't have that. And when you don't have enough souls to upgrade something, the souls are basically just lost. You can get like an ability that allows you to keep 30%, but still only 30% is not a huge amount. So I found that honestly in my last 3 hours of playing, I think I upgraded like maybe 2 or 3 things, because it just became so hard to upgrade anything, even if you're making it a pretty far way through the game in general. So now let's move on to my thoughts on this game and my rating. So I would give this game a rating of a 6.5 out of 10. I would say that this game it's not bad. It's a very solid game. I don't think there's any of the mechanics it has that are bad or anything that does wrong. I just think that in general, it's just not it doesn't have anything that stands out compared to some of the other games that I've been talking about. I don't think it has anything that I would want to purchase this game for specifically. I think that everything this game does, that The Binding of Isaac or even Dead Cells does as well or better. So it's not like, I feel like a 6.5 sounds like a negative rating. That's almost half, right? But I don't know, the standard to which games are held these days is, I find, kind of silly. Like, everything seems to be a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, and I think that that's unrealistic. Not every game can be amazing. That's why we have an average out of 10. Shouldn't the vast majority of games kind of be around the 5 area, and only the best of the best be all the way up there at 8, 9, and 10? So, me giving this game a 6.5 doesn't mean it's bad. I just don't think it excels enough to really get a higher rating. So if you do have the Humble Bundle, or you did have it during March when this was released, I would say, if you're interested at all in this type of game, go ahead and download it and try it out, unless you've already got something like The Binding of Isaac, where you might as well just stick to that, unless you're really bored of that game for some reason. But if you didn't have the Humble Bundle and you're looking at possibly buying this game, I would say to just go ahead and not buy this game and pick up one of the other 2 that I've mentioned. I mean, I will mention that this game at $10 is about half the price of Dead Cells, and I think almost a third of the price of The Binding of Isaac if you add all the DLC in. But I still think that it's more worth it to spend the extra money on those 2 games over this one. So I want to say thank you for watching my video. This will probably be the first in a bit of a series that I do. I'm planning to do a few others on similar games that were kind of the extras included in the Humble Bundle monthly package, and just kind of looking at a few more, and because I think it's kind of fun. So if you enjoyed this video, yeah, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, I guess.